He is part of College Game Day, which will be emanating from The Ohio State University at the Horseshoe, taking on Penn State. That's a big game, certainly based on the fact of the top 7 teams in the college football playoff ranking that just came out last night is the same as the previous week. He is David Pollack from the Worldwide Leader in Sports. How are you, David?
Great. Rich, how you doing, my man?
I am doing fine. So run it back, basically, is what the College Football Playoff Rankings Committee essentially said. I'm wondering what you take out of the latest rankings.
Well, obviously, run it back for this week. I think Alabama in a predicament. You know, you look at all the teams around them. Obviously, Georgia has an awesome chance in a couple of weeks with LSU to make a big statement. Ohio State is still very much in control of its own destiny. LSU in control of its own destiny. Clemson in control of its own destiny. And you got Oregon and Utah who are going to play each other in a couple of weeks that are going to be beating down on Alabama. I think this week we don't learn a lot about Alabama and their future, but without Tua and not playing another marquee game, you know, Auburn will be a good game to prove something. You know, Alabama's in that spot right now at 5, and Georgia obviously could slip up to LSU in the SEC championship game, but I feel like Alabama's the team, when you look at the teams in the top 7, that's not really in control of their own destiny, though.
So are we in a similar situation, I guess, with Alabama than, I guess, maybe Ohio State from the year that they won it all? We were all wondering if they should even go because their starting quarterback wasn't there, and Cardell Jones showed us all of that. Do you think Alabama might actually be pointing to that Ohio State team when it's all said and done, saying they deserve a shot despite Tua being hurt?
I think they will, but that was also the Big Ten championship game. And one of the criteria for the committee they talk about is, you know, head-to-head, and they talk about conference championships. So Alabama won't have that opportunity. They're not going to be in the game. It's going to be a good Auburn team, don't get me wrong, and they'll have Mac Jones and a chance to make a big statement. That was 59-0 with Cardell Jones and Ohio State. So it would have to be something, you know, monumental. But more importantly, I think they're going to need some help. I think they're going to be in a tough situation, but even if they look really, really good, because, Rich, what's the resume that you point to with Alabama? Everything the committee talked about was eye test, and rightfully so. And here's the thing. Tua being – if I'm an LSU fan, first of all, I didn't want to see Bama again. I don't want to see – if they play 10 times with Tua in the ballgame, I think Alabama wins at least 5 of those games. You know, I think you go 5-5, whatever. You could tell he was banged up. You could tell he was limited. So the committee, you could tell, had a little leeway and would have used it. But now, you know, Mac Jones would have to look phenomenal. And then, like you said, that game, it'd have to be – and I think they still need other teams to lose because they still wouldn't be in a chance to win a conference championship.
David Pollack here on the Rich Eisen Show. So then why Alabama 5? I mean, if we're sitting here saying they might not have the resume for it, and we're sitting here and saying that they're not going to play in the SEC championship game, we're virtually as sure of that, then why are they above the team that will most presumably be your Pac-12 champion? Are we getting a hint that, hey, Pac-12 championship, you better be pretty damn good and compelling to get in there? Because we're assuming LSU at Georgia might not make it, right?
Yeah. Well, I think when you heard Rob Mullins talk on the committee last night, he was talking to us, Rich, and he said a big deal. He said, we judge these games as of right now. He said Alabama went out and smacked around Mississippi State this past week, and they looked great doing it. Well, Tua was a part of that. So I think they're judging the committee and the teams on what they see right now. And listen, I think you could make a case, Rich. Oregon's best win is a loss to Auburn. I mean, if you want to point to stuff, that's what everybody points to. They had that game in hand. They played well. They should have won that game, but they didn't. Aside from that, they beat the Washington and Washington State teams by 6-7 points combined. You know, so I think Utah obviously losing to USC is a big deal. Alabama at this point lost to LSU. I mean, they lost 46-41 with their quarterback being hobbled and probably 70%, 60% of what he normally is in a pretty competitive game. So I think that's what the committee's looking at right now, and that's what Rob Mullins intimated to us last night.
And how big was that Oklahoma comeback on Baylor? I mean, that was unbelievable. That was, I mean,
Rich, the thing to me is how they did it, okay? This wasn't Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield spinning bean all over the yard and making big-time plays. Lincoln Riley is a smart enough coach to understand, like, listen, I'm not the same team. Jalen Hurts is not that guy that can do that. What am I going to do? I'm going to run him 25, 30 times. and I'm going to wear out Baylor, because Baylor kept giving them – they kept playing very conservative in the back end, and all they did up front was continue to stand people up, move people around. You had to run the football to beat Baylor that night. Lincoln Riley and them had to be conservative. They played ball control. Their defense played right at the right time. But I tell you what, Rich, it's a great win for Oklahoma, but the Big 12 is in trouble. I mean, I can't even paint a scenario where the Big 12 gets back in this over the next couple weeks and gets in a college football playoff position.
Well, you just stole my next question out of my mouth, because it just seems here again that the way it's all set up. Assuming Ohio State wins out, Clemson we know won't get touched unless something shocking happens. Let's put it that way with Clemson, or even LSU. Even if LSU loses to Georgia in the SEC championship game, we're assuming they're going to get in, even if it is a close loss, which would seal out both the Pac-12 and Big 12 champions. So I was going to ask you, assuming one of them gets in, which one would you say gets in, Pac-12 or Big 12 champ?
I think the Pac-12 has the best chance. If Georgia wins, it kills the Pac-12 and the Big 12. But Utah and Oregon sitting 6 and 7, and the opportunity to play each other in several weeks down the road and make a statement and become a champion of your league is a huge deal. But you know what you can't have? What the worst thing that could possibly happen would be Ohio State losing to Minnesota. Like, imagine LSU beating Georgia and then Minnesota beating Ohio State. What the heck are you going to do? Like, Clemson's in. Georgia's in. Minnesota has to be in the college football playoff. Now it comes down to LSU and Ohio State. Like, that would be my kind of selection Sunday, the last week of the season if we got some craziness. But, that would also put a lot of conferences at jeopardy, and it's obviously the Pac-12 and the Big 12. But the Pac-12 is definitely in a better position than the Big 12.
David Pollack of ESPN College Game Day joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show for a few more minutes. I'm sure Penn State fans are raising their hands right now saying, hey, what about this weekend here? How do you see Penn State at the Horseshoe versus Ohio State working out, David?
Man, Penn State's leaking oil. I mean, they're a team that had a lot of momentum early, but has definitely struggled. And I was just watching Minnesota and Indiana games back and looking at their defense. Their defensive front seven is really, really good. But they struggle versus play action. I think I took notes. It was like 17 of 17, Rich, in play action the last two games against Penn State, where the quarterbacks literally were 17 of 17. And they struggle. They're too aggressive in the back end, biting down, and they just struggle in the back end, period. So they're going to have to score a lot of points, and KJ Hamler's going to have to be healthy, and they're definitely going to have to. They're going to have to get hot again. They're going to have to find their mojo again. They got a great defensive front seven, but Penn State's not playing their best, and I think Ohio State has played consistently really, really good throughout the season. So I think Penn State's going to have to get some fortuitous bounces like they did a couple years ago and make some plays in special teams and create some big plays like that if they're going to try to pull the upset.
Well, you could make the case that halftime of Penn State-Michigan was potentially a turning point for both teams. As you said, Penn State's leaking oil. That first half looked great, and then the second half not so much, and Michigan was leaking oil pretty much up until that halftime, and Jim Harbaugh said, we're about to have our finest hour, and who knew he saw something good coming, and it has developed. Do you see any shot for Michigan in the big house against Ohio State?
Oh, Michigan?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Michigan's playing great, Rich. I mean, I think they're one of the hottest teams in college football, and they got a great identity offensively. And I think the teams that Michigan would struggle with would be big physical teams, because Michigan's not what they used to be up front as far as size and quickness and speed and playmaking like they were with those big old suckers in the trenches with Winovich and Gary and all these guys had over the last couple of years, but they still got speed. They can still play man cover. They still have good corners. They still have great speed in the front seven. And so I think them and Ohio State are on a great collision course. And wouldn't it just be a fitting result just to see Michigan maybe beat Ohio State at the end of the season? Like, wouldn't that just be like last year Ohio State ruined Michigan's season at the end of the year when nobody really gave them any chance, and this year Michigan's going to come in as a huge underdog, and it just seems fitting for this rivalry that we all love to watch every single year at the end of the season, that something like that would happen, or we're going to talk about it for at least a couple weeks.
Yeah, we'll see. But that would obviously be a remarkably satisfying ending for Michigan fans to that season. First things first, you got Ohio State, Penn State this weekend, obviously A&M versus Georgia, Texas at Baylor in that regard. And I'm sure you'll be discussing all of that on College Game Day. Last two for you, David Pollack. Your Heisman Trophy, you hand it to Burrow right now, or does Chase Young over the next couple weeks coming back after his suspension have a shot? Hurts? How do you handicap this race right now?
No, it's Burrow's, man. I mean, it's crazy to say that right now and to think about the journey that this offense has been on. But, I mean, just completing an insane level of passes and just who completes 77% of their passes? Like, that's not human, Rich. Like that, Rich, it's hard to do that on air. Like, that's hard to go out and do on a 7-on-7 and to be so productive and so good in so many big moments. And every time his team needed him, I think he's far and away the Heisman Trophy front runner. If Chase Young didn't get suspended, let me tell you something. This defensive lineman was going to be beating the drum for him. I mean, because he is the most dominant player in college football. And at the end of the day, what separates Clemson, LSU, and Ohio State, what separates them to me from being the top team in the country, not one has Chase Young, one doesn't. That guy's a super freak. Okay, I mean, he can dominate a football game defensively more than anybody, and it would have been interesting to see him not get suspended. I think him getting suspended hurts it, but it's Joe Burrow. I don't know how you're going to make it any other way, shape, or form.
And last one for you: the most safe for work sign that you've seen on the set of College Game Day behind you this year. What safe for work that you can tell me right here on a radio show? What sign that has been brought by a College Game Day fan is in your clubhouse? Is your favorite sign of the year?
Yeah, last year we were at Baylor, and it was big on quality losses and justification by people. So there was a World War II sign, and it was pretty creative, talking about how it was a quality loss in World War II as opposed to being a just outright loss. That was a good one we had last week. The "We Want Bama scratched out LSU" signs are starting to take off and be really, really funny because of this season and watching LSU take off. So those are two that I can think of on top of my head.
David, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Say hello to everybody. Reese is as great as they come, man, and just not only host but people and Desmond and everybody else. Have a good one.
No problem. Will do. Thank you, Rich.
You got it. That's David Pollack of ESPN College Game Day right here on The Rich Eisen Show.
For more of The Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live or download the Rich Eisen Show app.